When we think about who invented our modern world, a few names always pop up, right? Edison, Bell, you know the lineup. But what if I told you the official story is missing some pretty huge chapters, that the real blueprints for our world were drawn by hands we have never even heard of?
So that begs the question, who really built the modern world? Well, today we're basically going to be historical detectives. We're going to dig through dusty archives and forgotten patents to uncover the real story. You ready? Let's get into it.
The story we're usually told is pretty simple. It's this idea of a few great men of invention who just, poof, created the future all by themselves. It's a nice, tidy story, for sure. But the truth is so much messier and honestly, way more interesting.
And if you want a perfect example of that official record, just look at Thomas Edison. His personal archive, it has 5 million pages. Yeah, 5 million pages of notes, drawings, you name it. He is the absolute gold standard for documented genius. But that got me thinking, what about the brilliant people who couldn't even afford a secretary, let alone an archive that big?
And that question, it brings us perfectly to our very first case file. It's about a device you've almost certainly used today, maybe even in the last hour. But its origin story is a textbook example of how history is written by the winners. We are, of course, talking about the telephone.
Right? You hear telephone, you immediately think Alexander Graham Bell. It's like a reflex. But the paper trail, the actual evidence, it tells a very different story. And it starts way before Bell ever filed that famous patent.
So let me introduce you to a man named Antonio Meucci. He was an Italian immigrant, and get this, he figured out the basic principle of the talking telegraph all the way back in 1849. By 1856, he had a working system connecting his wife's bedroom to his workshop. He even filed something called the patent caveat in 1871 for his teletrafono, which is basically like putting a temporary hold on an idea. But here's the heartbreaking part. By 1874, he couldn't afford the renewal fee, so his claim just vanished.
And right there, that is the core of the problem. You've got Meucci with the idea, the working prototype, the early legal claim. He had it all. Except for one thing. Alexander Graham Bell had what Meucci didn't: deep pockets and serious financial backing. And it turns out, in the fight for who gets remembered by history, money can be the ultimate decider.
But you know what? This story has a pretty amazing ending. This historical cold case was finally cracked. Over 100 years after he died, in 2002, the U.S. House of Representatives officially recognized Meucci's pioneering work. Talk about justice being served, even if it took a little while. Case closed.
Okay, so Meucci's story is incredible, but it is definitely not a one-off. It turns out that for a lot of inventors, especially folks who weren't part of the establishment, the courtroom was just as important as their lab.
Just try to put yourself in this situation. You've invented something truly revolutionary. You're in court fighting to protect your life's work. And the argument the guy who stole your idea uses is, and I quote, "A woman could not possibly understand such mechanical complexities." Unbelievable, right? Well, that's exactly what Margaret Knight was up against when a man named Charles Annan tried to steal her invention.
Oh, but he messed with the wrong inventor. Knight came to court with an absolute mountain of evidence. We're talking meticulously kept journals, super detailed technical drawings, her actual handcrafted models made of wood and iron, the whole shebang. She proved without a shadow of a doubt that the idea was hers. And you know what? She won. She got the patent for the machine that makes the flat-bottomed paper bags we literally still use every single day.
And the stories just keep coming. Let's talk about Granville Woods, an absolutely brilliant African-American inventor. He was so prolific with so many patents that people started calling him the Black Edison. And that nickname, well, it turned out to be pretty prophetic because he was about to go head-to-head with the real Edison.
So Woods invents this game-changing multiplex railway telegraph. It allowed moving trains to talk to stations, which was a massive deal for preventing collisions and saving lives. Well, Thomas Edison saw how valuable it was, claimed he actually invented it, and then sued Woods for it. And he didn't just sue him once, he sued him twice. And here's the kicker. Against all odds, against the most famous inventor in the world, Granville Woods won. Both times. Edison was apparently so impressed by this that he offered Woods a high-level job at his company. But Woods said, no thanks. He chose to stay an independent inventor. So, okay, we've seen these incredible battles for recognition happening in courtrooms, over patents, but what about ideas that are so old they predate our entire modern patent system?
Well, to find some of the most fundamental building blocks of, well, everything, we have to go way, way back.
Okay, think about these things. Crankshafts, camshafts, float valves. They might sound a little technical, but they are the absolute bedrock of modern machines. We're talking about everything from the engine in your car to the simple mechanics inside your toilet. So, where did these genius ideas come from?
The answer is probably not what you're expecting. They were all laid out with incredibly detailed instructions and diagrams in the year 1206. Yeah, 1206, in a mind-blowing manuscript called the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices by an inventor from the Islamic Golden Age named Al-Jazari. These are foundational engineering concepts, documented almost 600 years before the Industrial Revolution even kicked off. It completely reframes the story of innovation we're usually told.
So we've seen all this evidence, right? Meucci, Knight, Woods, Al-Jazari. It really makes you wonder, why does this keep happening? How does true genius just get lost? Well, let's play detective again and identify the main culprits behind these historical cold cases.
It pretty much boils down to 4 big reasons. First, you've got financial barriers. That's what got Meucci. Second, social prejudice, the kind that Knight and Woods had to fight tooth and nail. Third, just plain old disasters, like records being destroyed. And finally, sometimes inventors themselves chose to keep their work a secret instead of patenting it.
And when we say disasters, we're not talking about a leaky roof. The U.S. Patent Office had not one, but 2 catastrophic fires, one in 1836 and another in 1877. Thousands upon thousands of our country's earliest patent records just gone, up in smoke. Entire legacies wiped out in an instant.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really hopeful turn. Because today, there's a whole new generation of digital detectives, of archivists and historians who are using technology to reopen these cold cases and, piece by piece, rewrite the blueprints of our history.
And it's really happening. You've got these incredible efforts like the Smithsonian's Field Book Project, which is digitizing fragile, old scientific notes. The Lemelson Center is actually using an army of digital volunteers to help transcribe inventor journals. Museums are carefully preserving these precious artifacts. We are literally, piece by piece, bringing all this lost knowledge back to light for everyone to see.
Think about it. Those dusty shelves in basements that were totally inaccessible, they're becoming searchable digital databases that anyone, anywhere can look through. The real, complete history of invention is finally being unlocked.
And honestly, that's the most exciting part. This isn't the end of the story. It feels more like we're at the very beginning of this huge wave of rediscovery. It really just leaves you with one question, doesn't it? Whose story is going to be uncovered next?